Hi there, everybody. All right, so I came on today. I thought we would talk a little bit about home food preservation, just kind of an overview of the different methods, what they're used for, and what their purpose is. As I've mentioned in the past, I grew up in a family where food preservation was a nonstop year-round thing. We did it every year, year after year. We did utilize various methods for different foods and different products, and we ate from that constantly. And as I've grown up, gotten married, had my own family, they grew up doing the same things. I find food preservation to just be a skill that's useful to have. Is everyone going to do it? No. Is everyone going to be 100% self-sufficient and do this, food thing and grow it? No. It's not necessarily something that everyone wants to do, but it's not a bad skill to have. So let's go ahead and just kind of go over kind of what happens. And I do have some notes here just to keep me on track because I could talk all day about this. So when we think about food preservation, why are we doing it? We are stopping the spoilage of food. We are slowing down the enzymes, the microorganisms, the naturally occurring bacteria, all of the things that cause that food to start deteriorating and breaking down. Why does that happen? Why is this thing? I always like to take a tomato plant for an example. If we think about a lovely tomato plant out in the garden that is producing beautiful red tomatoes for us, our goal for that tomato plant is for it to produce beautiful, juicy red tomatoes for us to eat. But the plant, that's not its goal. The tomato plant doesn't care about you and me. The tomato plant's only goal is to sustain life. It wants to produce tomatoes to house seeds that will drop and produce more tomato plants. So they have a different need, a different desire than we have for that food. So when we think about preserving food, we are actually thinking about stopping that natural chain of events from happening. We want to disrupt spoilage and move forward. So what we're going to do, the things that affect that for our food is, first of all, what type of food it is. Like I mentioned, that tomato is a housing for seeds that when it falls to the ground, it will naturally start to break down and decompose, providing food and nutrients and the right environment for those seeds to start to grow until they can develop the roots and photosynthesize and live on their own. There's a very real reason why plants do that, but they also need the right environment. They're going to need acidity or alkalinity. So certain foods are highly acidic by nature and certain foods are alkaline by nature. In their right environment, they're going to break down at a particular time. So time is another thing that they need. They're also going to need oxygen and moisture. Most bacteria and natural organisms and enzymes in the foods need those things in their environment to produce and thrive and grow well. We are going to look at the different ways that we would stop that from happening. So if we think about things, when we're starting to break it down, we have different methods. So the first method of food preservation is refrigeration or freezing. Most of us probably already do that now and didn't even think about it. But if we are bringing that tomato in from the garden or from outside in a farmer's market or from the grocery store, we're going to put it in the refrigerator or possibly the freezer. And that's the first thing that slows things down. Now, refrigeration and freezing do not kill the enzymes or bacteria. They slow them down. So not the longest lasting food preservation method, but definitely one worth thinking about. Some of the other methods that are really common would be freezing. So when we freeze those fruits and vegetables, again, we are doing a little bit to it. So we're probably going to chop that fruit or vegetable. We might blanch them in boiling water and then ice water, and then we're going to put them in a freezer safe container, and they're going to last 4 to 6 months, potentially up to a year. Best quality often is 4 to 6 months. Now the other one that is very common is drying. Drying fruits and vegetables or herbs or leafy greens is fairly simple. Again, some things may need a little bit of blanching, but for the most part, we're simply going to take that item. For example, I have here peppers. We're going to either buy them or harvest them. We're going to make sure they're nice and clean. We're going to cut them into the shape that we want, and we can either dry them out in the air, dry them in the oven, or dry them in a food dehydrator like you see behind me. These are shelf stable for, again, 6 months to a year. They will last more up to a year than they would if they were frozen, because we've removed the moisture from this food, which would have fed the enzymes and microorganisms. Drying is very popular. Another method that we see often would be canning. I have here a water bath canner and a pressure canner, dependent upon whether we have made jams or jellies, whether we have pickled or fermented, or whether we're using the food in its natural state. We have to know whether that's a high acidity food or a low acidity food. Those high acidity foods like strawberries, jams, jellies, tomatoes, sauces, salsas, those are going to be water bath canned. Water bath canning is a little quicker. It still does have a bit of an investment to it, but it's pretty easy to do. Pressure canners are for low acidity foods. For example, if I were going to can this butternut squash, that's a very low acidity food. So I would need to clean it, chop it, put it in a jar, fill it with water, add a little salt, and then it's going to be in this pressure canner, and that's going to take a bit more time investment. Pressure canning is a slow process, but it has to be done effectively in order to get those foods to the right temperature, because in canning, we are heating the food to a temperature where it kills the enzymes and bacteria, and then we're also creating a vacuum seal situation. As you'll notice here, this lid is vacuum sealed. It's sunk down so the air is out of it. It's tightly lidded on there. We have a vacuum situation, so there's no oxygen here in this jar. We have pulled as much oxygen out as we can, and we have also cooked it to a temperature where we've killed the microorganisms and the bacteria. So when we're thinking about which one of these methods that we would be using to preserve our food, we kind of have a few questions to ask ourselves. The first and foremost one is, how much time do I have? Do I need a really quick timeline? Do I need to hurry? I mean, it's not going to take very many minutes to toss something in the refrigerator and let that slow down. But remember, that's only a few days. Refrigeration doesn't kill the enzymes or the bacteria. Do we have enough time to chop that food, blanch it, and then package it in the freezer? Time is one thing, but we also have to have enough freezer space to store the amount of food that we're preserving. Now, drying or canning. Again, that's going to be a matter of time and investment. You can dehydrate food in the open air. You can also dehydrate it in an oven. Some things can be dehydrated in a microwave. Once dehydrated, they need to be in an airtight container. That could be a jar, a zip bag, a vacuum seal bag, or it could be in plastic containers. However, once they're dry, we can put them up. We need to have the space, and we will be investing in a container. Still not as expensive as canning might be. Canning would be the next thing to consider. If I want something that is shelf stable, that I can put in the pantry, I can leave in the shelf space that I have, that will last a long, long time, the longest time possible, then canning would be the way to go. Because most canned goods, we're looking at best quality in a year, but still edible after, as long as the seal isn't broken and there's nothing seeping from the jar. So canned goods are going to be the longest shelf stability we have. However, you're going to have to invest in the canner of choice, jars, these lids with the rubber seal, canning rings that look like this, and then of course you'll need some tongs, a funnel, and things of that nature. Some of these lids are reusable, some are not, depending on what type you get and which one you go with. The one-time investment is going to be rather intense. So, for example, this is a Presto canner. This is a water bath or pressure canning canner. So it can be both. We have the weight here if we are pressure canning. Of course, it has the seal, the rubber seal that we need, the gaskets that will pop when it comes to pressure. It's going to fit tightly on there. This can be used for water bath or canning, and it has specific instructions to help you with that. Now, to purchase this at the local box store, such as Walmart, you're looking at between $39 and $60, just depending. Those are the two prices I've seen, the price range. And it will come with the tray in the bottom for your canned goods. So that's the initial cost of the canner. Once you have a canner, then the only thing you might have to replace is this rubber gasket every so many years, because they can dry rot and deteriorate. Jars, canning jars can be purchased in a box for $12 to $15. They will have the jar, some lids, and a ring. Everything will be reusable except this lid. Those lids are one use only. You can reuse rings, you can reuse jars, but not this lid with the rubber gasket on it. So that will be kind of a continual investment to think about. Typical canning is going to take the longest amount of time, but remember, it's going to have the longest amount of storage space. One other thing to consider when you're trying to determine which one of these methods you use is, what is the purpose of the food later? When you go back, when you put this food on the shelf, what's your future intended purpose for it? Jams and jellies are pretty limited. You kind of have to eat them like jams and jellies. Pickles, pickled items, fermented items, that kind of come out and they need to be used the way they are. But if I'm canning tomatoes, or I'm putting up tomatoes, I could freeze them. That still means that when I thaw them out, I'm going to be cooking with them. I could dehydrate them and then rehydrate them at the time of cooking, or create a vegetable powder that can be added to foods. Or I could make sauces or salsas with them. So kind of think about what's the future purpose of that food, and that might also help you determine which preservation method is the best one for you. Over the next several weeks, we're going to meet here on Friday, either here or in the kitchen, and we're going to work through some recipes. We're going to send you the recipe that we're cooking or preserving for that week. Pardon me. And then I'm going to walk you through step by step how to do that. So this next week, we're going to look at how to freeze foods. We're going to walk you through which foods have to be blanched and which foods don't. We're going to talk about the different types of freezing and the different containers that we can use. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask. I have no problem with a phone call, with an email, with an instant message, with it dropped in the comments. We're here to help. Here at the County Extension Office, that's part of our job, is to help you with home food preservation, because we want you to get the best for your food dollars. We want you to have safe and healthy food to eat. So give us a holler. If you're already preserving and you're looking for a recipe, let me know. I have a plethora of recipes, and we'll talk more about that in the weeks to come. Until then, have a great day. See you in the garden.